To prevent prisoners from faking their deaths, whenever someone died in the prison, the warden would personally hold a torch and burn the soles of the deceased's feet. But this time, the flame burned for a long time, and the old man remained completely motionless. The warden confirmed he was dead, and ordered the guards to put the body into a body bag, to be thrown into the sea come evening. The guards covered him with the shroud and turned to leave, but little did they know, all of this was seen clearly by another prisoner in the tunnel. As soon as the guards left, Edmund crawled out of the tunnel. He threw himself beside the old man, looking at the priest who had helped him survive the long imprisonment, and almost entirely broke down. Now that the old man was dead, and he himself was trapped in this island prison, dying here was only a matter of time. Edmund had wanted to give him a proper farewell, but the moment his eyes fell on the body bag, he suddenly stopped, because he realized, if the priest was going to be thrown out of the prison as a corpse, then he could use this body to get out of here too. He quickly tore open the body bag, dragged the old man's remains back to his own cell, and placed them on the bed, arranging them in a sleeping position. He then cut off his own hair, and stuck it to the old man's head, doing his best to disguise the body as himself. After finishing the setup, he returned to the old man's cell, pried open a stone on the wall with a small knife, and pulled out a rolled-up piece of paper from inside. It was exactly the treasure map the old man had left him before he died, telling him that a fortune capable of changing his destiny was hidden on the island of Monte Cristo. Edmund didn't have time to look closely, so he could only hide the treasure map on his person. He then slipped into the body bag, and sewed the bag shut with a needle and thread. For someone who had been locked up for 14 years, this was no longer a risk, but the last chance to stay alive. In the evening, the two guards returned to dispose of the body. When they lifted the body bag, it felt noticeably heavier than expected, but neither of them thought much of it. To them, disposing of the dead in the prison was just a repetitive daily chore. To prevent the body from floating to the surface, they tied a heavy iron ball to the bottom of the bag, then carried him to the edge of the wall, and threw him straight into the sea. The moment he hit the water, the iron ball dragged Edmund downward. Seawater flooded into the cloth bag, immediately cutting off his breath. Fortunately, he had already hidden the knife on himself. In a life-or-death moment, Edmund desperately cut open the body bag, and severed the rope around his feet, finally breaking free from the drag of the iron ball. He swam upward the whole way, and only when he broke the surface of the sea did he breathe air again. But he didn't dare to stop, because as soon as the prison discovered the body had been swapped, the pursuit would quickly begin. Meanwhile, the guard in the cell block came on time to deliver Edmund's meal. After calling out a few times with no response, he opened the cell door and walked right in, only to discover in horror that the person lying on the bed was actually the remains of the old priest who was supposed to have been thrown into the sea.
God! Call the governor!
By the time the warden rushed to the cell in a panic, and pried open the loose bricks to find the secret tunnel between the two men, it was already too late to undo anything. By this time, Edmund had long since swum ashore, stepping foot on free soil once again.
Well, don't just stand there! Run! Serve the cannon! Muster the guards!
At this point, the prison was in total chaos, and the sounds of the pursuit echoed from afar. Edmund, having made it ashore, didn't dare to linger. He immediately sneaked into a nearby farmhouse, dug out some ragged clothes from a closet to change into, and took off the prison uniform that represented his humiliation. Just as he was hurriedly straightening himself up, he accidentally caught sight of his face in the mirror, and instantly froze in place. He hadn't looked in a mirror for a full 14 years. The weather-beaten face in the mirror was too far removed from the self he remembered. 14 years of imprisonment and hard labor had completely transformed that once high-spirited young man. He stared blankly into the mirror for a moment, then heard the sound of the farmer returning home from outside the yard, and hurriedly stuffed the only two valuables on him into his pocket and left in a rush. Relying on his vague memory, he found the small town where he used to live. Right now, his most urgent task was to find out what had happened to his father. However, the news he received was yet another heavy blow.
He died many years ago.
When did he die?
5, 6 years ago.
Hearing this, Edmund's mind instantly went blank. He pushed through and walked to the local church, and, guided by the minister, found his father's grave. The minister said this poor old man had died a lonely death a long time ago, with no one coming to mourn him, because his son, Edmund, had been imprisoned for treason 10 years prior. Everyone on the outside assumed he was long gone. He originally thought that as long as he escaped, there would still be a chance to explain the misunderstanding from back then, but reality told him that 14 years was not a period of time that could be made up for. It had already taken away the person he should have protected the most, leaving him with nowhere to deliver even a belated apology. He looked around, and noticed another headstone standing next to his father's grave. Engraved on it was his very own name. It wasn't until this moment that Edmund realized his imprisonment back then was absolutely no misunderstanding. Someone didn't just want to destroy his future, they also wanted to erase him from everyone's memory. His father dying alone, his fiancée leaving, the town even setting up a gravestone for him. All the outcomes were too perfect, so perfect that they didn't seem like an accident, but rather like someone had planned everything out long ago. Carrying his doubts and hatred, he went to the place where his fiancée Tess used to live, but what awaited him was another blow.
She married and moved to Paris.
Like a walking corpse, He walked down that street where everything had changed, not knowing where to go for a moment. Suddenly, he saw several guards chasing a fugitive. After the man was knocked to the ground, the guards still didn't stop beating him. As Edmund watched the scene, the anger he had suppressed for 14 years was instantly ignited. He knew all too well the pain of being disposed of arbitrarily without being able to explain oneself. He had no time to judge right from wrong. He just instinctively didn't want to see another person oppressed by power. So he rushed forward, knocked down the guards, and saved the fugitive. The fugitive's name was Jacopo, a merchant who smuggled brandy. After being saved, Jacopo decided Edmund was his benefactor, and insisted on following him. Edmund didn't want an extra burden, and told him to leave several times, but Jacopo simply wouldn't go.
Get away from me. Hey, you, go that way.
While the two were arguing, the patrolling guards chased after them again. In a critical moment, they hid in a carriage, and were quietly taken out of the city by the driver, narrowly escaping the pursuit for the time being. On the way, Edmund learned from Jacopo that he had a boat anchored in the bay, only he didn't know how to sail. This news immediately gave Edmund a sense of direction, because he used to be a sailor, and sailing a boat was no challenge for him at all. He immediately offered to help, and then sailed the boat straight toward the island of Monte Cristo, instead of going back to Jacopo's hometown as Jacopo had intended. After docking, he lied and said he was going up the mountain to catch a goat to fill his stomach, and arranged for Jacopo and his nephew to stay behind and guard the boat, while he climbed to the top of the mountain alone. The treasure map left by the priest said that in a spot where the entire bay could be seen, there was a rock shaped like a rabbit, and 20 meters west of that rock was the hidden entrance leading to the treasure. However, Edmund walked over practically the entire mountain, but he found absolutely nothing. Unwilling to give up, he searched according to the instructions over and over again.
20, 21, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36.
But still found nothing. Just as he was in complete despair, Jacopo ran up from the bottom of the mountain, saying the weather was clear and there were no signs of a rainstorm at all, and urged him to hurry down the mountain and sail the boat home. Since the boat belonged to Jacopo, Edmund had no choice but to leave with them. As the boat sailed away from the island of Monte Cristo, Edmund kept looking back constantly, and it was in this very glance that he noticed two stone pillars standing side by side at the top of the mountain, shaped exactly like the rabbit rock marked on the treasure map. His heart instantly swelled with excitement, but he suppressed his emotions and kept quiet, secretly memorizing the location. Not long after, they arrived at Jacopo's hometown. Jacopo's family, to thank Edmund for saving his life, hosted him with great hospitality. The whole family sat around the dining table, laughing and chatting. Jacopo even wanted to introduce his sister to Edmund to be his wife, which scared Edmund into hurriedly waving his hands in refusal. But none of this put Edmund at ease. Instead, it made him even more silent. If it hadn't been for that frame-up, he should have had a life like this too. He would be by his father's side, would start a family with Tess, instead of being like he was now, not even able to reveal his own identity. Late at night, he lay in bed tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The words the priest had spoken echoed in his ears over and over again.
But where great treasure hoard is hidden, I believe it's still there.
Finally, he couldn't wait any longer. While everyone was fast asleep, Edmund quietly stole Jacopo's small sailboat, and sailed towards the island of Monte Cristo once again. After daybreak, he landed on the island again. This time, he didn't search aimlessly, but went straight beneath those two giant rocks. He looked carefully according to the map's hints, and finally found a blocked opening behind the stones. Edmund moved the stones away, bent down, and crawled inside. At first, there was nothing special in the cave, but as he continued deeper, the sight before him stopped him in his tracks. Dozens of boxes, large and small, were scattered in the center of the cave. He eagerly opened them, and every single one was filled with all kinds of gold, silver, and jewels. He reached his hand into one of the boxes. Gold coins slipped through his fingers, clinking with a crisp sound in the silent cave. Edmund looked at the wealth before him, and finally understood that Abbe Faria had not lied to him. Edmund walked out of the cave, facing the morning light rising over the sea. At this moment, he was very clear. The young captain of the past who believed fate would treat him fairly, had already sunk into the sea along with that body bag, and the man walking out of the island of Monte Cristo was no longer just Edmund who had narrowly escaped with his life. He carried 14 years of unjust grievances, the truth behind his father's lonely death, and wealth sufficient to move all of high society. What he needed to do next was not to return to the past, but to use a brand new identity to find out who had sent him to prison.